Hello, YouTubers! It is time once again for our current events segment here on Level-Headed News. Here on the 20th day of October. Are flying right on through the month, aren't we? Just like the witch on the broom headed for Halloween. Jump right on into the news for you here. The first one that I have for you is off of WND.com, and it says nearly 1 million illegal aliens crossed border in 2016. And see if we can get this to scroll for us a little bit so I can read it to you. Here we go. There's all the URLs in the description of the video so you can take a look at them at your leisure. And most of them will have there. If you want to take a look at the videos and do more research on any of this, you can. Let's say she's rolling a little slow here. I think my hamster's about wore out. It says U.S. Department of Homeland Security released data showing illegal immigration spiked 23% in the fiscal year leading up to the November election. But that was only part of the story. The DHS report said 408,870 illegal aliens were apprehended at the southern border in fiscal 2016, up 23% from 2015. That in itself was shocking, since Democrats have always maintained that deportations have increased under Obama, and the hullabaloo over illegals was a fiction meant to stir up the Republican base. But Senator Jeff Sessions, Republican of Alaska, chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Immigration National Interest, issued a statement late Tuesday that focused on another number. This is only half the story. The 408,870 does not include those illegal aliens who evaded detection and successfully entered the United States, Sessions said. Sessions, an advisor to Donald Trump, cited testimony before his subcommittee earlier this year in which Brenda Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council, said that for every who is apprehended, another evades arrest. This statistic reportedly has been confirmed by DHS, but the Obama administration refuses to release that information, Sessions said. Using that rate as a baseline, that means approximately 408,870 illegal aliens evaded detection for a grand total of roughly 817,740 illegal entries into the United States last year. Million illegal crossings in 2016. So there you have it. However, a true picture of the total number of illegal immigrants coming across the border, more than 800,000 in 1 year. And even that doesn't include the number of immigrants who overstay their visas after legally entering the country. Another report put out by the Center for Immigration Studies Wednesday shows asylum applications for border crossers up more than 900% since 2009. This is notable that Monday's announcement did not indicate how many of the 408,807 apprehended aliens were actually removed from the United States, Sessions said. Although those numbers will not be known for some time, the simple fact is that tens, if not hundreds of thousands of those apprehended are still in the country, Sessions said. Indeed, Brenda Judd also testified at that same hearing that approximately 80% of the aliens that the Border Patrol actually apprehends are released and not immediately deported. Data revealed earlier this year indicated that Obama administration allowed 97% of their unaccompanied illegal alien juveniles it previously apprehended to remain in the United States instead of being deported. And the percentage of members of so-called family units who have been allowed to evade deportation from the United States is similar, according to Sessions, who is advising Donald Trump on immigration issues. in new illegal arrivals is alarming, particularly the increase in family arrivals, said Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies, a Washington-based think tank focusing on immigration. The Obama administration's catch and release policies serve as a major motivation for people around the world to make their way to the United States border, Vaughn added. The real problem is that we have no way of knowing for sure how many or who evaded detection, she said. The Border Patrol does not have full awareness. It's got something trying to play here. Yeah, they need to stop. Maybe I got it stopped. We'll see. The Border Patrol does not have full situational awareness in all places. If all of the teens and families are approaching the Border Patrol in order to get their permission to stay, then the 817,000 could be a little on the high side. But the real problem is that our government does not know. What we do know is that the Border Patrol doesn't really patrol all of the border, and that Border Patrol agents are told not to arrest every illegal that they encounter, and that they are often distracted by the groups of teens and families allowing other loads to get by undetected, and that many illegal settlers don't have to bother with the border anymore, as they can walk up to a legal port of entry, ask for asylum, and be allowed to enter, she said. Unfortunately, many communities around the country are paying the price for these lax policies, as they have to pick up the tab for the schooling, health care, and other social services that the new arrivals will be accessing. Sessions says the consequences of these policies are rising crime rates and less safe cities. The Obama administration's open border policies have made our country less secure than we were 8 years ago, eviscerated any semblance of credibility in the immigration system, and have created an ever-growing financial burden on U.S. taxpayers, Sessions said. The country cannot sustain this course. The Obama administration and the special interests may not believe in secure borders, but the American people do. Article that I have for you is off of the WashingtonExaminer.com. Give the little hamster a chance to catch up here, running its little legs off on all this stuff that I've been bringing you in. I brought a special edition a little bit ago, so if you haven't seen that, you want to take a look at that later. And it has to do with the election and the debates and all the news that I had stacked up on that. We'll get right into this one here if we can get the little hamster to cooperate with me. There we go. This is off the Washington Examiner. Illegals seek asylum up to 900%, cash, welfare, and school loans. The number of illegals seeking asylum to gain easy access to the United States has jumped 900% in less than 10 years, greatly expanding the immigration population receiving Social Security benefits, school loans, green cards, welfare, and other taxpayer-funded services, according to figures from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. 8,000, mostly Latin Americans, in 2009
This
sought
is a mobile
asylum.
trading desk, so I can take my trading platform wherever I go. You know that Thinkorswim seamlessly syncs across all.
My goodness. Okay. While about 8,000, mostly Latin Americans, in 2009 sought asylum, the number is expected to reach 80,000 or more this year, according to a projection from the Center for Immigration Studies. The report said 80% come from just 3 countries that have already flooded the border with youth and youth families: El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Most claim a fear of torture, abuse, or retaliation, fulfilling the U.S. requirement that they must voice some credible fear of returning home. The surge was sparked by freeing up by President Obama of the restrictions to those requesting asylum. Now they are let into the United States while they pursue their asylum request. The author of the report, Jessica M. Vaughn, the center's director of policy studies, said many of those arriving at the border claim asylum are trafficked through Mexico by gangs charging fees to get their clients into the U.S. What's more, typically many are granted a temporary okay, then find their way into U.S. cities. A House panel found that some 90% are granted asylum, though only 30% of the requests were fraud-free, says the CIS analysis. New in the latest numbers, she said, was rising in immigrants from India seeking asylum. They, too, arrived via gang trafficking. The only non-Latin American country to rank in the top 5 nationalities of asylum seekers reported by USCIS is India. The influx of Indians appeared to have heated up in 2013 along the Arizona border and show signs of being organized or facilitated by smuggling organizations, with some paying as much as $35,000 to be guided to this area. In 2015, the number of Indian asylum seekers began to exceed the number arriving from Ecuador, a long source of illegal immigration through Mexico, said the report. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network, Incorporated, has published a pamphlet that shows all the federal programs those granted asylum get, including green cards, Social Security, school loans, welfare, Medicaid, cash, and housing assistance. Next article that I have is off of news10.com. It says Russian lawmakers back Putin's suspension of plutonium deal. The lower house of Russian parliament has unanimously approved President Vladimir Putin's move to suspend a deal with the United States on the disposal of weapons-grade plutonium. Putin has cited the emerging threat to strategic stability as a result of U.S. unfriendly actions as a reason behind his move. Under the agreement, which once a symbol of U.S.-Russian Russia and the U.S. each were to dispose of 34 metric tons of weapons-grade plutonium through material for about 17,000 nuclear warheads. Putin said the argument could be restored if the U.S. pulls back its forces deployed near Russia's border and revokes anti-Russian sanctions. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told lawmakers Wednesday that Moscow could take other steps that would be painful for U.S. if Washington ratchets up the sanctions. Next one I have is off of the LATimes.com. It says California Attorney General investigates Wells Fargo on allegations of criminal identity theft. California Department of Justice is investigating Wells Fargo and Company on allegations of criminal identity theft over its creation of millions of unauthorized accounts, according to a search warrant sent to Bank San Francisco headquarters this month. The warrant and related documents, served October the 5th and obtained by the Times through a public records request, confirm that California Attorney General Harris, in the final weeks of a run for the U.S. Senate, has joined the growing list of public officials and agencies investigating the bank in connection with the account scandal. Harris's office demanded the bank turn over a trove of information, including the identities of California customers who had unauthorized accounts opened in their names, information about the fees related to those accounts, the names of the Wells Fargo employees who opened the accounts, the names of those employees, managers, and emails or other communications related to these accounts. Her office is also requesting the same information about accounts opened by Wells Fargo workers in California for customers in other states. Kristen Ford, a spokeswoman for Harris's office, said she could not comment on the ongoing investigation. Wells Fargo spokesman Mark Folk said the bank is cooperating and providing the requested information, but would not comment further. Filed along with the search warrant say there's probable cause to believe Wells Fargo violated two sections of the state penal code, one outlawing certain types of impersonation, the other outlawing the unauthorized use of personal information. Both violations can be charged as felonies punishable by imprisonment for more than a year. It's not clear whether Harris's office is considering charges against individual bank workers, high-level bank executives, or the bank itself. The investigation could lead to charges beyond the identity theft allegations used to secure the search warrant. In the weeks since September the 8th, when the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office and federal bank regulators announced a $185 million settlement with Wells Fargo over the creation of the accounts. Lawmakers and other regulators have questioned whether the bank may have violated fraud, labor, and securities laws. At a fiery Capitol Hill hearing last month, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, told Wells Fargo Chief Executive John Stumpf that he should be criminally investigated. Stumpf abruptly retired last week and was replaced by longtime Wells Fargo executive Timothy Sloan. There have been questions about when and how much former bank executive Carrie Tolst, bank's division at the root of the account scandal, knew of the practices. She retired this summer in the lead up to the settlement, which was prompted by a 2013 Los Angeles Times article that uncovered the bank's practices. But identity theft has not been a central issue in the matter, and it's noteworthy that it seems to be at the heart of Harris's investigation. Policy director at the San Diego nonprofit Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. One wouldn't typically think a financial institution opening an account in the name of a customer as being an act of identity theft, Stevens says. It's a creative way of looking at these activities and finding them unlawful under a statute that arguably could be prosecuted in state court. In an affidavit used to secure the search warrant, state investigator James Hurt said there is probable cause to believe the bank workers illegally accessed Wells Fargo's computer system to find customer information, then used that information to open unauthorized accounts. Orders issued along with last month's settlement, bank regulators reported that Wells Fargo employees forged customer signatures, created personal identification numbers without customers' knowledge, and made up email addresses, and even moved money from customers' legitimate accounts into unauthorized ones to make them look real. The U.S. attorneys in San Francisco, New York, and Charlotte, North Carolina have opened their own investigations. Through the scope of these inquiries is not clear. Irving Einhorn, a retired white-collar criminal defense attorney and former head of Securities and Exchange Commission regional office in Los Angeles, said there are few charges that a state attorney general could bring that federal prosecutors could not. Still, he said it's not surprising that Harris's office is investigating the bank on its own. With a big national bank like this, there are overlapping jurisdictions, he said, not to mention political ramifications. Elected officials of all political stripes have been have jumped on Wells Fargo in the weeks since the settlement was announced, holding hearings, enacting sanctions, and calling for legislation aimed at reining in big banks or even breaking them up. In California, State Treasurer John Shinang last month said his office would cut off several business relationships with the bank, a move that since been followed by officials in San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, and the states of Illinois and Ohio. At this point, Einhorn said no one wants to be left out. You have to remember how it looks to constituents in particular state when their officials get tough with big bad banks, he said. The Attorney General's move to investigate the bank comes amid her campaign to succeed Senator Barbara Boxer, who is retiring from her Senate seat. Harris is running against Representative Loretta Sanchez, a fellow Democrat who represents Central Orange County. Harris has made her crackdown on wrongdoing in the financial services industry one of the themes of her campaign. She has especially pointed to her role in negotiating $20 billion in relief from banks for California homeowners who lost their homes or suffered losses in the housing bust. But that deal still resulted in many Californians losing their homes and did not lead to criminal charges against bank executives, opening her up to some criticism. By investigating Wells Fargo, Harris could be trying to burnish her bank-busting credentials, said Jack Pitney, a professor of politics at Claremont McKenna College. She's looking for every advantage she can get, he said. Going after big unpopular bank can only help her with her electorate. Wells Fargo has gone into Voldemort territory when it comes to popularity. Along with investigations by Harris's office and federal prosecutors, Wells Fargo is under investigation department, an outside law firm hired by the bank's board and 2 congressional committees. With so many agencies looking at the bank, it's likely that there will be more revelations about the scope and the detail of the problems that pushed more than 5,000 workers to open as many as 2 million unauthorized checking, savings, and other accounts for customers over the last 5 years. In a report last week after the announcement of Stump's retirement, Janet Seberg, an analyst for brokerage and investment bank Cohen and Company, said the former CEO's exit would not come close to ending problems for the bank. There are simply too many entities investigating not to surface, Seberg wrote. A raft of investigations into the bank's practices was one factor cited by the rating agency Standard & Poor's on Tuesday when it announced it had downgraded its outlook on Wells Fargo's credit rating from stable to negative. That means that although S&P did not cut the bank's credit rating, it believes the downgrade may be warranted. In a memo about the change in outlook, the rating agency said its concern, among other things, is about the potential consequences of ongoing legal and regulatory investigations. Standard & Poor's also said it's concerned about the long-term effects of damage to the bank's reputation. Some of those effects showed up in the bank's quarterly earnings report last week. The bank reported quarter of profits in the community banking division fell 9% from a year earlier, and the number of new checking accounts opened in September, the only month in the quarter affected by the settlement announcement, fell 25% compared with a year earlier. The company's stock closed Wednesday at $45.26, about 9% lower than the day before last month, $85 million settlement. There's the information on Wells Fargo. The next one's off of OregonLive.com. It says explosion reported in Northwest Portland, 8 injured, including 3 firefighters. Gas explosion in Northwest Portland at Northwest 23rd and Gibson could be felt blocks away. At least 5 were injured, including firefighters on the scene for a gas leak. Stephanie Yayo reports. And the article reads, updates with developments from 4 p.m. news conference. A massive explosion apparently ignited by a natural gas leak ripped through building Wednesday along with popular Northwest 23rd Avenue shopping district, causing destruction and injuring 8 people, including 3 firefighters, authorities said. Northwest Natural employees, along with Portland firefighters, responded to a natural gas leak reported at 8:55 a.m. in or near the 500 block of Northwest 23rd Avenue, said spokeswoman Melissa Moore. When we got there at 9:10 a.m., we evacuated the building, Moore said. There was an ignition. We don't know the source. The explosion happened at 9:38 a.m., the utility reported. Some witnesses said there were 2 blasts. One building that contained a bagel shop, a tattoo parlor, and eyewear business was destroyed, while the spa and condo building next door sustained heavy damage. Firefighters were inside one of the buildings when the explosion occurred, said Portland Fire and Rescue spokesman Lieutenant Rich Chapman said. More than 100 firefighters responded. The Bagel Building was listed on the Historical Registry of Buildings. The other was designed by well-known Portland architect Brad Klopfel and is owned by Robert and Ann Sachs, whose eponymous company is well known for its tiles. Says no one received life-threatening injuries. 2 of the firefighters sustained broken legs, and others underwent surgery for undisclosed injury. 2 police officers and 3 civilians were also hurt. Authorities didn't say what their injuries were. Portland Bagel Works was the anchor of the building that was destroyed, though it was unconfirmed whether the explosion occurred in the restaurant. The Dosha building next door was also sustained major damage. Portland firefighters responded rapidly after the explosion. An ominous billowing black cloud hovered over the Northwest 23rd area, known for its bustling scene of trendy shops and restaurants. Moore said there was construction underway at or near the address. She did not know the identity of the people involved in the construction. A third party was digging, Moore said, adding, "That's why we want people to call before they dig." Brittany Hughes, manager of the Portland Bagel Works, said a construction worker came into the shop and said crews had hit a gas line. He left before Hughes could say anything. "The next thing I know, my baker is telling me he smells gas," she said. "We called shop owner Richard Bartell, who contacted Northwest Natural. Firefighters arrived quickly and evacuated the area. And so after they evacuated our shop, it exploded," she said. And a late afternoon news conference at the site of the explosion, Portland Fire Chief Mike Myers said, "I have not seen devastation like this in my entire career." He said the work of firefighters prevented people from dying. The firefighter in surgery was Lieutenant Peter St. John's. He said St. John's made the decision to pull the fire alarms, evacuate buildings, and have firefighters put on their masks, he said. "This man saved a lot of lives today single-handedly," Myers said. Not long after Sarah Johnson arrived at Dosha about 8 a.m., the construction worker rushed over and told them about the gas leak across the street. The worker said to alert him if they smelled anything. It wasn't long before Johnson, assistant manager of the salon, sensed something amiss. "A few moments later, we started to smell some gas." Johnson said it didn't smell right. She alerted the construction workers who were also working on her side of the street. She said it wasn't clear what they were doing. Northwest Natural employees showed up about 10 minutes later and monitored the air. Johnson said they didn't find a trace. But then firefighters showed up and told everyone to evacuate. 6 people at Dosha, all employees, including one who was there for an appointment, walked onto Gibson towards Northwest 22nd Avenue. "They kept pushing us further back," Johnson said. "Maybe 15 minutes after we evacuated, it exploded. It exploded twice, and you saw glass shattering and smoke. The smoke was getting thicker and thicker. It was scary." She said no residents or pets were home in the apartments above the salon, but the explosion destroyed the building, said Kimberly Johnson, chief operating officer for Avita Institute. The institute and salon have the same owners. "It looks like it blew from within our building," Kimberly Johnson said. "There is glass everywhere, and the building is pretty much gone." Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center was treating and evaluating 2 firefighters, a police officer and a civilian. Spokeswoman Vicki Gwynn said about 11:15 a.m. By early afternoon, all but 1 firefighter had been released. 4 ancillary buildings of Legacy Good Samaritan Medical Center were without power after the explosion, Legacy spokesperson Megan Diesler said. She said power briefly flickered at the main hospital but continued. Diesler said most patients were being sent to Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center, but Good Samaritan also was prepared to accept patients. Rubble was strewn on sidewalks and into the intersection of Northwest 23rd Avenue and Gilson Street. At noon, smoke continued to pour out of the charred rubble as firefighters continued to spray it down. Safety and Reliability Program staff from Oregon Public Utility Commission were sent to the scene and began evaluating the utility and fire department response and procedures for keeping people safe at the scene. The commission filed a report with the U.S. Department of Transportation's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, and inspectors from the agency are likely to be involved in the investigation of the explosion, which would be led by Portland Fire Marshal's office. The commission is going to look at Northwest Natural policies and procedures to see if they were in any way negligent in terms of what could have prevented this, said Lori Coho, who administers Oregon's Pipeline Safety and Reliability Program. She said Northwest Natural has an active public awareness and damage prevention program, including its Call Before You Dig campaign. But there is so much construction underway with so many contractors looking to get things done quickly that third-party line breaches are not infrequent, she said. There are line hits way too often, but they usually don't explode, Coho said. A Northwest Natural official said that gas to about 115 customers has been shut off. PGE has also shut off power for about 2,000 in the area. Residents and others nearby described the feeling of persecution oh my goodness, try that again. Residents and others nearby described feeling the percussion and their power going out. Dylan Short, a 28-year-old worker at Piscato, across from the site of the explosion, said he was going about his business when firefighters arrived and told him there was a gas leak. Asked if he and his co-workers should leave, Short said firefighters told them to stay put while crews established a perimeter. Within minutes, however, Short said he was hit with multiple shockwaves as the business across the street exploded. Thankfully, Short said he and his co-worker were protected by a wall. If we had been in any other part of the restaurant, we would have been injured by shrapnel for sure, he said. Immediately after that blast, Short said he saw flames spewing from what was left of what used to be a multi-story building. It was 3 stories, and now it's just a pile of rubble, he said. In the aftermath of the explosion, Short was shaken but unhurt. He said he saw one woman being helped from the scene and firefighters with blood streaming down his face. Still, Short felt fortunate. It was lucky for us that we were behind that wall, he said, but it's unfortunate for the store and the firefighters. Hopefully, not too many people were injured. Nick McAnally, staying in an Airbanim, I guess. I don't know. I've never seen that word before. The explosion site said he and his girlfriend felt 2 explosions separated by 10 to 20 seconds. All of a sudden, we felt this huge explosion. It shook the whole house in the 2200 block of Northwest Gibson. Anally said. We froze and looked at each other, and that's when the second explosion happened. It still shook the house, but it was maybe half the intensity of the first explosion. Before the blast, McAnally said he and his girlfriend, vacationing from Wichita, Kansas, noticed something was amiss when a fire truck arrived about 9 a.m. in front of the I don't know what that AIRBNB Airbdom. I don't know. A firefighter emerged from the truck and immediately began attaching a hose to a nearby hydrant. We thought that was odd, he said. The first blast happened moments later, he said. McAnally saw people running from the area. He also took photos of the scene, including an image of a bloodied firefighter. I don't know why they would be inside the building if there's a gas leak, McAnally said. After the blast, a Northwest Natural employee walked through the neighborhood. McAnally asked what he and his girlfriend should do. The employee replied, "If I was you, I'd get out of here." McAnally headed to a Starbucks closer to the Pearl District and plotted the next part of their day, a Segway tour of downtown. Kumar Nahandra, age 50, said he was settling into breakfast about 9:40 a.m. when he felt a jolt like an earthquake. It shook my apartment, he said. Naharaja lives on the 4th floor of an apartment building near Northwest Lovejoy and Northwest 25th Avenue. He peered out his window and saw smoke that he mistook for morning fog. I heard a loud explosion and someone cried, "Wow," he says. It sounded and felt like a bomb, said an employee of Westover Dental Clinic, 419 Northwest 23rd Avenue, who did not want to be named. It was that loud, it shook the whole building. Cameron Oxenham lives in an apartment building across Northwest 23rd Avenue from the explosion site. It looked like a bomb had gone off, Oxenham said before leaving the area. Eric Hoyman was home in his 24th floor apartment in 735 St. Clair building, which is at West Burnside Street, about 4 blocks from the explosion. He said it shook his building and sounded like a dumpster being dropped off a roof, like a kind of hollow wolf. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars converged on popular business district as a plume of acrid smoke billowed from the damaged, darkening, and unusually sunlit Portland autumn sky. Portland Commissioner Dan Saltzman, who oversees Portland Fire and Rescue, left Wednesday's city council meeting at about 10:15 a.m. and was on the explosion scene shortly afterward. Firefighters had been inside the bagel shop building, either investigating the leak or ensuring the building had been fully evacuated at the time of the explosion, Saltzman said. That northeast corner is totally gone, and possibly something to the north. It's pretty surprising given what looks like a large magnitude explosion not having more injuries, he said. Students and faculty at Metropolitan Learning Center, a citywide magnet school for students in kindergarten through grade 12, were evacuated from a building 2 blocks from the explosion site on Northwest Gillison Street. They were bused to Portland Public Schools headquarters near Rose Quarter, provided lunches for the 425 students, and notified parents they could pick them up early. An initial report the students would be sent to Lincoln High School was incorrect. The TriMet also is providing buses to support first responders in evacuating a school near the explosion scene in Northwest Portland. Spokesman Roberta Alstott said TriMet's Line 15 Belmont Northwest 23rd buses are detoured around the closed streets, and Lines 15 and 77 have been delayed. Fruit and Flower Child Care Center is located less than 2 blocks from the scene, and Northwest 24th Avenue and Hoyt Street, seen being evacuated from the center, some in cribs. The Multnomah County Health Department advised Wednesday morning that people taking precautions to not breathe the explosion's heavy smoke, noting that high concentrations of smoke can cause trouble breathing, irritation of eyes, throat and lungs, and skin irritation. Lena Cottrell was at the nearby Fresh Skin studio when she heard the loud boom, shaking the entire building and knocking wall hangings to the floor. At first, Cottrell thought a car had hit the building. One of the studio's employees, Haley Atterby, ran outside. She saw flames and smoke coming from the Bagel Works building. "I was panicked," she said. "It was a chaotic moment of not knowing what to do." Shadi Yatz, a hairstylist at Dosha, said it's all kind of a blur right now. And Quinte McKinney, operations manager at Dosha, said it happened within 30 minutes of our business being open. McKinney said, "We had some managers and some retail staff there. Our full staff hadn't shown up yet. It's not the first time the building's been struck. Unfortunately, we had a dry run of this last year," Kimberly Johnson said. "A water leak about the same time last year destroyed the inside of the building. It happened overnight," Kimberly Johnson said. "There were about 2 inches on every floor. It took 3 months to restore the salon, and now the company is again scrambling, trying to figure out how to accommodate clients and staff. It was beautiful," Johnson said. "Dosha is trying to figure out what to do about people who had booked appointments and the employees who depend on the salon for their livelihood. We're pulling together to get it figured out, Sarah Johnson said. I'm just happy everyone's safe. At the news conference, Fire Bureau spokesman said any residents displaced by the explosion can get assistance through the Red Cross, which has set up an assistance center. And there's a link that you can click here in this article if you need any help with that. It says the Bureau also plans to release on Twitter the names of buildings that are safe for residents to return to. The number displaced has not been determined, but 181 people live on the affected block. And there's links there that you can click if you need assistance with that. And there's videos and pictures and tweets and all kinds of things in this article if you want to take more look at what's going on there in Oregon. The next one that we have for you is off of themonitor.com, and it says, in Paris, refugee crisis puts new strain on city homeless problem. Paris, the wind whips up edges of multicolored tents butted up against each other on the street of Paris Avenue de Flandre, home to several hundred refugees and migrants from Somalia, Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan since the summer. Mustafa Mohammed Andouav, who occupies one of them, is confronting a challenge similar to some 28,800 Parisians not having a proper home. It's 95 degrees. Here it's freezing, especially at night, says the young man, who has been living on the street for 5 days. Mr. Andouav has applied for asylum in France, but with his fingerprints already registered in Norway, possibly determining his ultimate destination, he doesn't know what his future holds. If my request gets accepted, I'll stay here. If not, maybe I will live here like the homeless people. I don't know. Life is on the street very hard. Andouav joins a growing number of migrants who, as they wait for their asylum request to go through, find themselves on the streets of the French capital, adding to an already serious homelessness problem in Paris. The city is moving ahead with a variety of programs to address the issue, particularly the lack of housing that is at the root of the problem. But it's likely to experience additional strain amid plans to close migrant camps in nearby Calais, potentially adding thousands to the city's homeless population. We need a permanent solution because, as it stands, there are very few centers that can handle the demand, says Antoine Picard, a sociology professor who teaches international migration at Sciences Po. The market is saturated, and so people find themselves in the street, he says. Paris' struggle with homelessness, like that of most major world capitals, is far from new. The city has been dealing with growing homelessness for decades, but it reached new heights when Europe's financial crisis hit in 2008. What began as a phenomenon affecting those who were isolated or couldn't find work as morphed into a more widespread problem affecting single-parent families, single men, and young people. While the numbers ebb and flow, local NGO estimates that of nearly 30,000 people without permanent homes. There are around 2,000 who live around the clock on the streets of Paris. The number of people without permanent housing in Paris increased by 84% from 2001 and 2012, according to National Statistic Bureau, INSEE. Says salaries have not progressed at the same rate as rental prices, and more people are working on temporary part-time contracts, which hasn't helped the situation, said Eric Constantine, the regional director for LDG France at the non-governmental organization Fondation Abbé Pierre. The city has since worked to make housing in Paris a priority. It has vowed to create 7,000 social housing units each year, including turning a former Renault garage and abandoned post office into apartments for families by 2020, and hopes for transform 1,000 unused chamber de bones former maids' quarters that often act as miniature apartments into viable living quarters. And in yearly contest that allows Parisians to send in their ideas for how the city should spend 5% of its budget, a project to provide more adequate housing won out over all the others. So while many say there is not enough housing to go around, the city is rising to the occasion. The state still isn't putting enough money into dealing with the problem, but at least there is a desire to fix it here in Paris, says Christophe Louise, director of Les Enfants du Canal, an NGO that works with diverse homeless populations around French capital. Despite criticism last year with France's homeless community that the city was putting more money and effort into tackling the immigrant crisis than homelessness, Mr. Constantin says it's dangerous to conflate the two issues. People need to stop saying that the migrant problem is making things worse for homeless people, says Constantin. The lack of housing was definitely a problem before. Nonetheless, the influx of migrants in France, and especially in Paris, has put pressure on already strained emergency housing mechanism. In France, asylum seekers can seek temporary housing for as long as it takes for the requirement to be processed at one of the many CADA centers. There's no room at the CADA's. Asylum seekers may end up at the CHU, a place for anyone seeking emergency housing, migrant or otherwise. Foreigners who end up in the street have the same rights as any other homeless person in France, in that they have the right to emergency housing, says Matthew Tardis, a migration specialist at the Paris-based IFRI think tank. But neither the CADA nor the CHU can handle the current number of demands. EU border agency Frontex says 1.8 million people entered Europe's borders in 2015. Of that number, there were more than 80,000 people who applied for asylum in France and just over 19,000 who were accepted. The average processing time is 205 days, according to NGO France Tour d'Asile. For those waiting to hear back about their applications, the idle time can be excruciating. I don't know what's going on, says Rashad, a young man from Sudan who has been living in Paris, CHU, for a month while waiting to hear about his asylum request. I don't know how long I can stay in the center. I have no information. I will just wait and see if I stay in France or move to another place. To try to take some of the pressure off Paris's emergency housing centers, a long-awaited humanitarian camp is set to open in Paris at the end of October, first of its kind in a European urban center. It will welcome 400 men, with a second center to accommodate 500 women and children set up to open by the end of the year. But while Mayor Anne Hidalgo, I guess is how it's pronounced, has been heralded for the initiative, the camp will act as more of a processing center than a housing structure. Stays will range from just 5 to 10 days, and the potential shutdown of Calais by the end of the year could put Paris at risk of even further saturation, with migrants in competition for housing with those already here. It's a moment when migration and homelessness will undoubtedly collide, and NGOs are preparing themselves for the influx. Migrants have very specific administrative status and are handled differently than the average homeless person in France, says Mr. Louise. But if their asylum requests are rejected and they find themselves without anywhere to live, they become our responsibility, and that's when we step in. So there's that information. And the next one that I have for you It's off of WashingtonPost.com, and it says, as Oregon's wildlife refuge occupation case draws to a close, contrasting stories compete for jury's approval. Portland, Oregon. 8 months after the armed occupation of Oregon's remote Malheur National Wildlife Refuge came to a dramatic end, the month-long trial of 7 defendants is slated to be finished and in the hands of the jury by Thursday. Arguments presented Tuesday and Wednesday, the government and defense teams painted starkly different portraits of the 6 men and 1 woman accused of engaging in a conspiracy to impede federal officers from performing their duties at the refuge. Prosecutors argued that the conspiracy charges have been amply proven. U.S. Fish and Wildlife officers who worked at the refuge weren't able to perform their duties because gun-toting occupiers had taken over their offices. But the defense argues that the occupiers were doing the opposite. They were acting nobly, and that lead defendant Ammon Bundy was leading peaceful political protesters to act in the spirit of King Jr. when they took over the federal facility. The Bundy family has become notorious in the rural West. In April of 2014, after 2 decades of illegal grazing cattle on federal land, Bureau of Land Management officials descended on the Bundy Bunkerville, Nevada ranch to round up the animals. Instead, they were met by hundreds of armed patriot protesters, many on horseback, waving U.S. flags and carrying guns. The people had been called by Ammon's father, Cliven, to stand off the BLM officers and keep them from taking his cows. After the standoff became heated, particularly after Ammon Bundy was tased, BLM officials backed down, releasing the cattle, and left a crowd of cheering protesters behind. Cliven Bundy and his 4 sons faced trial in February on charges stemming from that event. The early 2016 occupation of the Malheur Refuge, a sanctuary created by President Theodore Roosevelt to protect birds, began January the 2nd. On that day, Ammon Bundy announced to a crowd of peaceful protesters in Burns, Oregon, that he, his brother Ryan Bundy, and several others were taking a hard stand to protest government overreach at the nearby refuge. The takeover, he soon explained to the media, was a reaction to the imprisonment of 2 local ranchers, Dwight and Stephen Hammond, for setting fire to federal land, a hotly contested arson charge that comes with mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. Bundy said the Malheur takeover would go on until the Hammonds were freed from prison and the refuge land was given to the people of Harney County, Oregon. The trial included weeks of testimony that the armed protesters at the refuge were peaceful, but in closing remarks, the government pointed to the evidence, which included more than 16,000 rounds of live ammunition, and asked the mostly female jury to see the simplicity of the conspiracy charges. People brought their ammunition, their guns, to fortify themselves in a space that didn't belong to them, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Ethan Knight. By occupying the refuge, tearing down signs, and setting up shop in the offices there, Knight argued that the Fish and Wildlife officers employed there were being sent a message: you're not welcome here anymore. We've changed your place of work. Go home. Knight said that the defendants simply don't play by the rules. Ammon Bundy is someone who believes the rules apply to him when he wants them to, he said, noting that viewing the occupation as a political protest, one characterized during the trial as Martin Luther King-style sit-in, flies in the face of common sense. Are these defendants guilty? The answer to that question is easy, Knight said. But for 4 hours Tuesday, Ammon Bundy's attorney, Marcus Mumford, argued otherwise, referencing the 10-hour testimony that Bundy gave earlier this month. During that testimony, Bundy, who has chosen to appear only in blue jail scrubs with a small pocket-sized Constitution in his breast pocket since the second day of the trial, spoke at length about the ideas that led him to occupy the refuge. His Mormon faith, his steadfast belief that the federal government is not allowed to own land according to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the United States Constitution, and his interpretation of adverse possession. On several occasions, Bundy offered to read parts of the Constitution to prosecutors and Judge Anna Brown. Mumford implored the jury not to be fooled by the government, simply at the refuge to reveal injustice, not to impede federal employees from doing their work. He's been falsely accused of being a conspirator, Mumford said. His problem wasn't with federal employees, it was with their employer. Mumford argued in the spirit of his client's beliefs that the federal government cannot own land. Mr. Knight says over and over again they didn't belong there. Well, you know what? Mumford pointed toward the prosecutor. Neither did they. After arguments in which Mumford compared the refuge to the last can of chili on the shelf at a grocery store, and which featured a slideshow of quotes from past U.S. presidents, he asked the jury to see Ammon Bundy as a political protester. Are you going to let yourself be deceived, he asked. You can't let them get away with it. On Wednesday, the remaining 6 defendants presented their arguments, including Ammon's older brother, Ryan, who has acted as his own attorney throughout the trial. In his closing argument, he stood before the jury in a shirt and tie and black leather vest, emphasizing to the jury that government and media painted a false portrait of Malheur occupation. The government wants you to believe that the refuge was a scary place for government workers, he said. I ask you to stand with us, stand for freedom with us. So there's the information from Oregon that I have for you. This is an interesting site. It was somebody sent to me, and it's called massprivateeyeblogspot.com. And the article here that they wanted me to read, now there's a whole bunch of really neat articles on here. It's very enlightening, but the one that that they're pointing out is DHS uses firefighters to enter homes and give everyone assessments. DHS is using firefighters to spy on Americans in their own homes. DHS is using the U.S. Census to ask Americans questions about smoke detectors so they can give homes a fire risk assessment. The above video, approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, shows how the New Orleans Fire Department took it up a notch and went door to door, boots on the ground, entering residents' homes to install smoke detectors in people's bedrooms, kitchens, etc. According to the city of Orleans, analytics informed smoke alarm outreach program, the New Orleans Fire Department, or the NOFD, has been going door to door giving homes free fire risk assessments since 2015. So it just kind of goes to show you something may look kind of good on the surface, but you let folks into your home, and the next thing you know, they're reporting you for anything that they deem necessary. If they don't think your house is cleaning up, or if they happen to see your guns, or whatever. If they don't like the fact that you're a prepper, maybe you have some food stocked up or something like that, and they happen to spot it, anything they want to turn you in for, they can turn you in. So be careful who you're letting into your house. And you might want to take a look at that site, because like I said, it's got some interesting things on it. The next one that I have here, this is this is for the Rockhounds. I know that there's several people that I've spoke to that hang out here on my site and on some other sites, and they'd be interested in this article. And it's off of iflscience.com. It says, miners unearth massive jade stone worth $170 million. And I mean, this thing's huge. You need to pull this article up and take a look at this boulder. Holy smoke. This guy's standing there beside it, and I mean, he looks like nothing up against this huge piece of jade. It says, mammoth-sized chunk of jade stone has been unearthed in Burma, the Southeast Asian country, also known as Myanmar. The discovery was made in a remote mine in Kachin State in the north of the country. It measures 5.8 meters, 19 feet long, and weighs a whopping 175 tons. That's 192 U.S. tons. The BBC reports. It's believed to be worth an eye-watering $170 million. I assume that it is a present for the fate of our citizens, the government, and our party, as it was discovered in the time of our government. It's a very good sign for us, said local politician Yu Tint-so, according to The Independent. The stone is reportedly heading for China, where it will be carved into jewelry and sculptures. Oh man, it's almost a shame to carve that thing up. Oh my goodness. The term jade can refer to two different types of metamorphic rock, jadeite and nephrite. This find is believed to be jadeite rock. The two types are similar in appearance and used for ornamental purposes, although they have a different physical and chemical composition, with jadeite being the most valuable of the two. It's extremely difficult to tell the difference just by visual inspection. Around 70% of the world's high-quality jadeite is thought to come from Myanmar and makes up around half of the gross domestic product. Unfortunately, the multi-billion-dollar trade is shrouded in government corruption, crime, and environmental destruction. Wow. And the last one that I have for you, this is your feel-good. I think you'll get a kick out of this. This is a YouTube video, and it's a minute long. And it says, college student gives $10,000 prize to grandma who saved her from foster care. And I'll do this in a screen share and let you watch this quick little video.
This $10,000 halftime shot was worth way more than the money. The crowd went wild as the University of Kansas Director of Basketball Operations, Brennan Bechard, sunk it for the second year in a row. He was playing for Jordan Steers, a college fan who asked him to shoot on her behalf. The contest was part of an annual event called Late Night in the Fog. Bechard then hand-wrote the check out for Jordan. She's giving the money to her grandma, who rescued her from foster care when she was 10 years old. Jordan was the first person in her family to graduate high school. $1 prize for her only parent to say thank you for putting the ball in her court. For InsideEdition.com, I'm Lee Sheps.
Well, I thought you'd enjoy that. Grandma rescued her from foster care, and so now she does something nice for grandma because she's got the opportunity to do it. That just, I don't know, it touched my heart. I thought that you'd all enjoy that too. So with that, we're going to shut her down, and I hope that it's a beautiful day where you are. If you get the opportunity, go out, kick off your shoes, stick your feet in the grass, soak up some earth energy, balance yourself, take a deep breath of fresh air, and be glad you woke up above ground. We'll catch you tomorrow. Bye.